Hello, welcome. My name is Kate Schaefers, and I'm Director of Lifelong Learning at the University of Minnesota, which includes the Midlife Academy. And we're here today to give you a sense of what the Midlife Academy is all about, to meet our facilitators, and to answer your questions. So let me just get started. A little bit of background about the Midlife Academy. We started the Midlife Academy because old models aren't working for people as they're living their lives today. We used to use the model of the three boxes of life where you go to school and then you work and then you retire and you have leisure. Well, we know that those models don't work anymore, and people are needing to make frequent pivots throughout their lives, especially at midlife and beyond. And so, as we're seeing more pivots, not only in careers and longer work lives, but in family and life transitions, we realize that there's a need out there for people, not only to help them navigate, but also to create some community around those transitions. And that's one of our goals here. So let's step back now and start with looking at some of the courses we offer and give you a chance to meet our facilitators. And I'm going to start with Megan Voorhees. You can see more on our website, and so you definitely can dive in deeper to some of the details about Megan's background as well as Courtney's. But let me just briefly say, Megan has worked as a life coach, a trainer, an organizational consultant, and she leads multiple programs for those seeking to cultivate purpose in their lives. She also brings a background in experiential education and public service, and she's going to help us understand a little bit more about her course. Megan, let me turn it over to you.
Hi, all. I can see in the chat or in the participant list, I know a few of you, so wonderful to see, pretend like I'm seeing all of you. So the Cultivating Purpose class is really a chance to step back and figure out, how you want to be living your life right now, how you want to make meaning, and make your life more meaningful. Taught the class for the first time this fall, and it just felt like an incredible opportunity for a group of people to come together. Nobody knew each other before they started the class, and have my sort of intention was is that all 8 weeks was a sort of mini retreat, a chance to step back and say, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? What do I want to be doing in the world? So the class includes a chance to get really clear about what are your core values now. They might have shifted as you come into midlife. What are your strengths and callings? What are your needs? What's not getting met? I think most folks came to the class feeling like there's something that's not working here, and what do I need to change? I think a chance, a lot of people really enjoyed the opportunity to look back at through their life stories and figure out like, oh, right, there's a thread here, a theme that's meaningful to me that I want to pick back up. Or there's some stories here that I need to change the narrative about. I need to sort of rethink how it is that I've been describing myself and who I am, and make some changes accordingly. And then, of course, a chance to really think about like how do you want to have an impact in the world and world with a small W, in your family, with your friends, in your local community, or much larger. I think the other thing I'd say, and I'm sure this will be true with all the Midlife Academy classes, is it's an opportunity to be with community and learn from each other, right? So I really think of myself, and I know Courtney does too, as a facilitator and, creating an opportunity for you to learn from yourself, but also from each other. I think that worked pretty well this fall. Our class already had a reunion in November and has already planned another one for January. So I can't promise that will happen with every class, but people really loved learning from one another in some different ways. The other things I would just say about the class, and sort of my facilitation style, as I said, I try to really facilitate and create a space for people to connect, to reflect on their own, to learn from one another, to learn from guest speakers, to learn from other stories in lots of different ways. I also really work hard to have a wide variety of activities. All of us learn and want to learn in different ways, so trying to make those connections. I also decided this fall, and it felt like the right decision for this particular class. I try to make it possible to not be on your computer or phone very much, even when doing homework each week. And so even if you sign up for the online class, you'll get a gift package ahead of time that will include a few things that I'm not going to tell you about because it's a gift and there should be some surprises in there, but also a printed sort of reflection workbook that you'll continue to rely on throughout the class. Kate also asked me to talk about who I think might benefit from cultivating purpose, and I really think that if you're feeling stuck and wishing that life had some more meaning or just not thriving in some way, the class could work for you. Um, this fall, we had a wide range of folks. I know often one of the questions is like, well, what do you mean by midlife and how old do I have to be? And I believe we had somebody who was 39 and we had somebody who was in her early 80s in the class, and it seemed to work for everyone. We had definitely people who were wanting to just spend some time really thinking about how their careers and how they might want to shift and change those. I think there's a much deeper dive into that kind of transition in Courtney's class. Folks who are preparing for empty nesting for the first time, and folks who are thinking about retirement or wanting to shift how they were already living retirement. So, and there can be other things that are obviously going on in midlife. I think even myself, I try to take some time and some retreat from my life to think about like, who do I want to be now? And how have I changed? And what maybe needs to shift? So that's why I feel like I hope the class is valuable to anyone who wants to take it. We are lucky to have one student from the fall class. A lot of folks had events tonight, so couldn't make it, but said they wish they could come. So I'd like to bring up Melanie Harding, who can share a little bit about her experience in the class.
That's better. I'm just on the computer speakers, but thank you for having me. Yeah, I was a participant in the first Cultivating Purpose class. I came to the class with experiencing a number of things in my life where I felt like I really needed change, and this was it was nothing short of amazing, honestly. It was hard. It was hard work. I will say that. It was digging deep, and but it was so rewarding. And I walked away with a number of tools that I will use for the rest of my life. So there are definitely things in the class that resonated with me more than others, but everything was put together so nicely and flowed really well. And I'm continuing to do the work that I started with Cultivating Purpose and Megan's fantastic leadership. I think one of the things that was so great about the class was not only the tools that I walked away with, but also the people. You mentioned the people, Megan, and how it was an opportunity to work with people who were experiencing the same thing that you were, but kind of wrapped in a different package, in a different wrapping. So it was nice. There was this commonality, but then there was also this diversity of perspective, which was really helpful. So I was extremely pleased and really happy to be here to recommend the class. The chance to just connect with people and get their perspective on not only your issues and your problems, but be able to contribute to theirs as well. Was truly wonderful. Just kind of I felt a little bit like it was a once in a lifetime experience. If that's not going too far, but so I'm happy as we move along here to answer any questions that people might have about taking the class.
Melanie, I know we'll be doing some more quick Q&A at the end, but you got a specific question. I'm gonna just answer it now. What made it hard? I want to hear the answer
Um,
to that too.
yeah, no, that's a great question. So it was hard because, you know, I'm 55. So midlife, I was probably like right in the middle of the age range of people that attended the class. And at 55, you feel like, well, I thought I had this stuff figured out. But I was really starting over in a way. And so one of the things that I really took from the class was I reevaluated my life values and how is it that I want to spend the rest of my time left on this earth. And that took some really digging deep. And sometimes it was about looking at myself and looking at the world around me and realizing that I'm going to have to make some decisions in my life, and some of them might not be easy. And so that's kind of an example of why it was hard. I hope that helps as an example.
And we also had a question about how the course has encouraged you to make any changes in your life. And maybe I'll just share a couple stories from other folks in our class. And if you want to add, um, we had someone in the class who was really wanting to change her job when she started. And by the end on our last day, brought salads for everyone to taste to start a new salad concession company. So if you go to your high school hockey game and you see salads, go up and introduce yourself and say, I bet this started fall of 2025. Um, it's someone who, often the changes are smaller, right? It's just like, we had two people who said, oh, from the first day, I realized that part of my issue is I'm on my phone all the time and I need to set it down and create space for other things that I want to be doing in my life. Um, Someone sadly who was widowed at a young age, and it's like I'm spending all my time with other widows, and it's just really great to be with other people who bring different energy to life in different ways. Um, Somebody who's retired is like, great, actually, I'm grateful to have the privilege to travel all the time. But I have other things that I want to do with my life, and recognizing that they're saying for those of us who I also am 55 like Melanie, that there's 50% chance we'll live till we're 100. So what do we want to do with that time? So a lot of different the changes, both sort of what we often called in the class little p changes, so sort of more day-to-day changes, and others who really wanted to shift things in different ways. Should we switch over and hear about Courtney's class and then we can take more
Yeah,
questions
I
and
do have, there's one question that came up in the chat that I'll ask. It's just the question is how much is individual work versus group work in the class?
Hmm. Um, so there are I don't know how to answer that in some ways, Melanie. There's definitely assignments, and I really try to make it clear. I know some people don't have time to do a lot in between class time, and others have more time. So I try to have our sort of, and this is going to be a bit of a change from the fall, Melanie. All of the core activities happen during class, so that'll be more individual time because not everybody has time during the week. I mean, we had some folks who were working full time and doing childcare and elder care and a lot of other things in life. So I don't want anyone to miss out on that. But then there's opportunity for more reflection and optional activities throughout the week. And then during class, as a facilitator, I think a lot about how groups need to breathe. And I think about how we need to go individually and small groups, but then to big groups and back. And I try to have that kind of rhythm of in and out, just like we breathe. I don't know if that all makes sense to you all, but that's how I think about it. And so I think when I'm at my best, we have a class that's sort of switching in different ways and different times. So.
And I thought, I mean, the way the first class was set up, as you said, it might be a little different, but I felt like when I was in the class, I was taking advantage of having this resource of having all these wonderful people around me who could contribute and give me feedback. And then when I went home, I was doing a lot of individual work. So for those people who have time during the week, you might think of that as just, I mean, it was really dedicated time for me. It was every Monday night, and I would take myself somewhere else. I would leave the house and go somewhere else, sit quiet, and work on something. And it was just a privilege. That's a privilege for me to have been able to do that. I realize, but that's kind of how I arranged it in my experience.
So let's bring Courtney in, and we do have some questions coming in, but I think we'll answer them as we go along. But let's bring Courtney in right now. Hi, Courtney.
Greetings, all.
So let me briefly introduce Courtney. Courtney has over 20 years of senior leadership experience across Fortune 100 companies, and she's also a vocal jazz performer. She brings a unique blend of corporate wisdom and heart-centered approach to her work, and she helps individuals and teams navigate career transitions, retirement planning, and personal reinvention. And she is going to be teaching our class Next Chapter Reset, maintaining or creating momentum. So welcome, Courtney.
Thank you, Kate. I am so thrilled to be a part of the Midlife Academy. It is so needed. This space where we can have honest conversations, as Melanie mentioned, with ourselves and with others at a different level of vulnerability than we may be accustomed to in the workplace. And there's something comforting and encouraging about being with people who you can have that level, you can choose to have that level of vulnerability with that aren't close to you. There's something about that. As a performer, I find it is scarier to perform in front of my friends than strangers, frankly. And I think there's some dynamic similar to that in a course like this. So a bit about next chapter reset, creating momentum. The class is ideal for anyone who has a sense of what they want to do in their next chapter, whatever that might look like, or people who are at that point where I've got a couple of things I'd like to work on, but I'm not sure. We can take any of that because this is about getting into action. And one of the things that I find really helpful, especially with all the transitions we all go through as humans, is understanding a model about what transitions are and the phases of those transitions. So that's one of the first things we'll dive into to help notice a name, identify, like, where am I if we use this model as our foundation of conversation for the 8 weeks? Where am I in the process? Because that also gives you an idea of where more than likely the next stage of the process will be. And once we determine that, we start looking at kind of those stories we tell ourselves, which means we also tell the world, because we tell the world how to interact with us, how we talk to ourselves, and really kind of unpack some of those. This came to mind after I've had it happen twice now with individual people that I coach, where we can help perpetuate the stories around the ageism we believe that we are encountering. So that's kind of an interesting thing for some of those, as I like to say, those of us who are not 20 anymore. And then we start reframing work. What does work mean? Is it or contribution? I mean, I want people to come up with their own word for that because I think that's important. And then we start looking at all the options that are really out there on how life could look, that contribution, how it happens. I am blessed to have a lovely woman in my life who is, she does all my social media on my music side. She's also 40 years younger. And I use her as an example of creating a life with an enormous amount of intentionality that works for her. And that model is something that I look forward to sharing with people. Like, it could look like this. In fact, I have said to her more than once, I wish somebody had emulated this kind of intentionality when I was your age. So we learn a lot from each other, which is kind of a cool relationship. And then we spend some time, we're going to design a 30, 60, 90-day momentum plan. You know kind of what you want to do. We're going to start talking about how you do it. Like, how do you put these things in place in your life? What does it look like? Then we'll start filling in some blanks of that plan. So looking at relationships, they change dramatically as we go through any transition. What do they look like? How are they forming? What may be missing in those relationships? Are there certain things that oh my God, that's a person I want to talk to. That's a group of people I need to learn more about, whatever that might look like. We will also talk about developing friendships and creating new friend groups. I find it fascinating that as adults, it gets a little hard to create friends sometimes. And we think about how simple it was when we were children. You're on a playground, you're out in the front yard, whatever it might be. You see somebody you don't know, you go, hey, you want to play? They're like, sure, let's play. And it was that simple to create a new friendship sometimes. So I want us to get back to that kind of being willing to interact with a stranger. I do a lot of networking on, I know that can be a negative term, a lot of connecting, let's put it that way, with people on LinkedIn these days. And I love starting the conversation with someone who's giving me the gift of 30 minutes of their time. If you think about it that way, the gift of their time, I always start out with, thank you for being willing to have a conversation with a stranger. And I've met some incredible people by taking that approach. We'll also look at like inventorying and planning out, like, what are all your resources? We tend to think we don't have what we don't have. We don't necessarily always delve into what we do have access to, and really broadening that, including the resource of the cohort you're with. all of a sudden you'll be around, let's say 25 people that have a myriad of resources that you may be able to tap into to help fulfill your momentum plan. And then, okay, we've got all this built. Now, how am I going to keep this going after this cohort no longer is in its structured format? We'll talk about how to do that, the resources to tap into, ways to hold accountability beyond the class. And I am a very big believer in celebrating and honoring and ending. A lot of us don't like to acknowledge those, but it's so powerful, even with an 8-week course or the end of a aspect of a transition, to take that time to say, wow, this is what I've accomplished. This is what I've learned. This is what I'll do differently. Whatever that reflection point is, I find it really powerful to put some closure behind that so you can easily move into whatever that next phase is. So I am just so looking forward to what this is going to look like, what we create as a group. And then, listening to Megan talk about a business got sparked out of this class. That was not in anyone's plan, I'm sure, for a course about finding purpose to go, wow, we helped as a collective birth a new business idea. I can't wait to see what happens. So, any questions for me, Kate, that are coming up?
Yeah, I'm just going through questions. Someone has asked, what is the, give an example of something that someone would do individually versus group tasks.
Well, similar to Megan's format, we'll be doing a little bit of both. There'll be quite a bit of group interaction, but a lot of like that building of the plan, those initial conversations things like that will all be individual. So we'll go individual. There might be some paired sharing or triad sharing, and then report outs to the bigger group.
Mhm. And I think, Megan, you have some reflection exercises too, as do you, Courtney. So, you might do some homework that is really trying to take stock of something, maybe some readings or watching like listening to
Video.
a podcast, watching a video to spark your thinking around things or to frame some of the discussions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's any well, there are group activities, I guess, in different ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know, trying to come up with an example. It became really clear in the class this fall, folks were nervous when I asked them to go out and talk with some different people about, sort of what I called experiments or
Mhm.
conversations with different people that would help them think about how they wanted to be living their life. So we practiced that as a class, and people had to go around and talk to a few different people, sort of speed conversations. Like, oh, right, it's actually helpful to put out there in the world what you're looking for and see who might have a resource or an idea or a useful question. So I think more of the sort of group activities are in sort of in that vein. But a lot of group discussion each week around like what's coming up now and what are you learning or what are you disagreeing with or what's not resonating. And when you have generally my classes are around 25 folks, that allows for a lot of really interesting conversation because of course we all have different perspectives and experiences.
And I'll just kind of use the networking word because I know a lot of times career counselors or business people are saying, get out, build your network. And I think it can be really intimidating for people. And I think that the approach that both of these classes take is that it's not necessarily about just building a network. It's about tapping into your resources that are out there and it's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. If you put 25 people in the room and
Hmm.
you put your intention out there of, you're interested in doing something, someone is going to know someone that's going to be able to give you some insights into the direction you're exploring. And yes, it's a little intimidating to put out in the world something you're thinking about that maybe has been buried, but to be able to do that in a safe space and then tap this amazing network of people that are right here in the room with you is really an amazing way to start moving forward. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that. Okay. Melanie, I have a question for you. How has the course encouraged you to make any changes?
Um, well, I think the
That
biggest
you're willing to
change,
share.
Yes,
yeah, sure,
of
sure.
course.
I think the I think of two things. One is one thing that we practiced that Megan encouraged us to do, and that I can't say that I'm doing it every day, but that I think about it often, and I try to practice it as much as possible. Is we talked about how important it is to pause each day, and what that can look different to different people, but kind of pausing and taking personal inventory for a minute and being mindful for a minute. Could be a minute, could be 5 minutes, could be an hour, whatever you need, whatever you have. Mostly for me, it's just a couple minutes here and there, and then sharing that with other people and getting ideas for how they do that. So, and I'm continuing to do that. So that's been one change. The other I would say is that word that Courtney and Megan both used, intentionality. So really just trying to be very intentional about what I'm doing, who I'm engaging with, who I'm how am I planning out the my future, and so being really intentional instead of haphazard about it and just letting it happen, taking charge, taking control, taking the wheel, and can't say that I'm completely there yet, but I think that's a change that's happening.
Mhm.
Nice.
We have a great question for anyone that wants to tackle this, but are there any conversations about letting go of things that no longer serve us?
Yes.
Yeah, yes is the answer. Absolutely.
Conversations and activities and optional rituals for those who needed it. So Kate can tell you, I all summer kept trying to figure out a way that if everyone in the class needed to burn something, we could do it. But it's really hard to do that in the classroom. Would have gotten me in some trouble at the university. But I came up with some other ways to both get clear about what needs to be let go of and to have, I think as Courtney, I don't know if you use the word ritual, but I would use some meaningful ways of figuring out how to let go.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if you think about it, even in the conversations of reframing, that's about letting something go. It's about letting a story go that you may have been carrying around with you for a very long time that really no longer serves you and doesn't represent who you are now and who you're becoming.
Mhm. Well, and I think too, I mean, the story about that we tell ourselves, it's also our identities, right? Like sometimes we're
Hmm.
ready to let go of an identity, but it's also so interwoven with how we see ourselves that that's a really hard thing.
It is. Think about how at points in our lives, people can be very married to their title, what they do, how they're known. And when that starts to change, that's a huge shift. And yeah, that's one of those things to let go of. You are inherently worthy because you're here, period. It doesn't matter what your title is, right? That's a tough one to get around, though.
We have a couple of questions about how the classes might differ from each other, and also are they sequential? Um, so I don't know who wants to start with that.
I can jump in. Uh, the classes are built to be completely independent and sequential if you so choose. So I know it can sound like that, if I don't have my purpose, I should start there. And if that's what works for you, please do. But if you've got an inkling of what you want, or you know that you need a change, you just need a little clarity on it, sometimes jumping into action and starting the planning process is a really good way of getting really clear of what you want, need, and don't want as you go through that process too. So they are not yes, there's no requirement to take one before the other. That's a better way to put it.
And Courtney is teaching Next Chapter Reset, Creating Momentum, which is, a little bit more finding your way forward. versus Megan is purpose is finding your why. I mean, we're trying to kind of use some terminology that seems to make sense, but yes, they're not necessarily sequential, although some people may choose to do it that way. It depends more on where you're at.
Mhm.
I mean, I will say there were a number of folks actually in my class that were like, okay, this has all been so helpful and sort of getting me thinking about my inner landscape and my bigger picture. And maybe I want to coach now. And then a couple of folks have already mentioned to me that they're thinking about taking Courtney's class because they liked, having a coaching experience really, but in community, and learning from others too. But I think it could go the other way too. It's like, oh, I want this, and then it's like, oh, I'm wanting some more of that, and I'm wanting this experience.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And I suspect I shouldn't speak for Kate, who runs the Midlife Academy, but there'll be other classes in the future too.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
we are really at the cusp of this. And I do want to say, I'm part of this it's international network called the Nexel Collaborative. It's higher ed, developing programs in this space, recognizing that, when we are looking at these kinds of transitions, the kinds of questions that people are asking at 45 or 50 or 60 or 70 are really similar to what our young adults are asking. Like, what do I do with my life? What skills do I have that are needed out there? How do I navigate this new world of work where I'm going to be moving from position to position, or maybe I've got a fractional workplace, or, all these questions are the same. And higher ed really does have the infrastructure in place. And we are all trying to figure out, like, how do we serve? Because we know that we don't want to necessarily just send you to existing programs that are targeting 18-year-olds. We need to also look at what's special about midlife and what kinds of things people are experiencing and customize some things for this life stage. And that's what we're trying to do here at the University of Minnesota. I will say we're one of the leaders in this space. There's other universities that are venturing into it, but universities are terrific places for us to come back and retool, but also to figure out what that retool is going to look like. So I have a question about the gender balance in classes. And the question was, are there any men in the class? And I will say, yes, there have been men in the class. We absolutely welcome men. And I will say, today there was an article that came out that mentioned us in Men's Health. So we're really proud of that. But I would also say that many women have found this to be helpful as well. So, we are, just like we're not absolute on anything. This is not, for women. This is not for men. This is not for people in their 40s, their 50s. Like, there's a lot of flexibility around what we're trying to do with this. And I think if you're coming wanting to recalibrate your life, wanting to find your way, wanting the next chapter to be one that's one that with intentionality, to reflect what's really important. I think all of what we're doing is aligned with that. Oh, thanks, Megan, for putting that Men's Health article.
It is an article about a number of different programs.
Yes.
I will just point out that as there's a question in the chat about what the cost of the courses are, and I believe all three classes being offered this winter and spring are $1,200 each.
Yes. And I will just
The
mention
next cheapest
too,
class that I know about in this space is 3,900, and if you go to Harvard, you're going to pay like 80K. So
yeah. Yes. And I will say too that if you are a University of Minnesota alumni member, we do offer a discount, or a University of Minnesota employee. And also again, for the University of Minnesota employees, we have wellness points that we can gather to look at our health insurance costs. And both of our courses qualify for wellness points. So, and again, and one question is like, how do I get my employer maybe or my department to help pay for this? And I if your employer pays for professional development, I mean, this is part of that. I mean, I think you could try to make a case. Certainly from a wellness perspective, we have that classification within our institution for wellness points. So, we know that career and purpose and finding your way are all part of healthy living. And so there is that option to explore that. And we'd be happy to help you think that through. Um, yeah, so someone did mention that online is really important for people who don't live in Minnesota and wondering if Courtney would be offering her class online.
I have not talked about that, but it's
Yeah.
a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first time, I mean, like early as we're developing these, I think doing them in person is so helpful
Mhm.
to kind of get that feedback from everyone and then moving that to online. It's like the basis is there, but then I think the facilitation skills are a little different online. I don't know, Megan, if you want to talk a little bit about just like how you're thinking about your class, but there are a lot of ways to build community online and we want to be committed to that.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work online and facilitation, and some folks aren't not familiar with these, but they're in Zoom or in sort of other online platforms. You can do breakout rooms and get people talking with each other in pairs or small groups. I also use just a number of tools that helps people feel like they're more in a space with one another. Whiteboards and post-it notes and images and music and poetry and sort of all of that, because who wants in the evening, especially if you've been at work all day, to jump on a computer for 2.5 hours?
That's right.
I imagine, and this, I don't want this to scare anyone away, so you can always opt to not do things in class, but I imagine in the online class, really encouraging folks to move sometimes, and building in
Mhm.
breaks, et cetera, too. So, yeah, I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. I'm open to new ideas, but I think we can make it work. I've led all day retreats online for folks, and like I said earlier, I do try to bring in a lot of different ways of learning and thinking about things, and I think that helps make the online experience work.
Yeah, I would
I
agree.
also will just say outside the class, and I did this with the in-person class too, there were times where people were supposed to check in with each other one on one, and they were paired up in texts. And one person said on our last day this fall, like, I was so upset about that. I didn't want to do it. And now it's the person I like the most in the class. And I got so much out of that experience. Actually, I think maybe it was the person who was paired with you, Melanie. Am I right? Maybe I'm wrong. I think so. It's like, because it's scary. It's like, who am I going to talk to? And so I sort of build that in even if for the in-person classes, right? It helps to make connections outside the class too.
Mhm. Absolutely. So we do have a question of what course would you recommend starting with if you don't know what you want? I've been so focused on achieving that I never really learned how to connect with interests or identify passions.
Hmm. I mean, I think Courtney's right that either course can work. Sometimes it's just getting started, right? And being like, I mean, for both of our classes, it's what, 24 hours of in-person time, and that's going to allow you to start to really figure out what it is that you might want. You will not be alone. I feel like that sentence that was just read about so being an achiever, very directed. So many folks talk about, and it's like, oh, but wait, there's so much more, and maybe I want to shift things and think about things in some really different ways.
Mhm. Yeah, so I do think either is going to help get you started. And, you may want to look at just timing and see which works, but, they're a little bit, I mean, they definitely have a different focus in just how they're structured, but I think they do complement each other um, there's some common themes woven in to all of them. I would
Yeah.
say community, I mean, connection, having safe space where people can explore and maybe voice something that might be a little scary for them to say out loud, finding that space to do that. And then getting some support for trying things out and talking to people. Um, let's see, what else do we have? Keep the questions coming. Um, someone did ask about a syllabus. We do have some information on our website about what we do, and then we have kind of, some outlines around that. We don't, when you sign up, we do have a bit of a syllabus, but I wonder, Megan and Courtney, if you could just maybe walk through just a little bit about some of the themes that you cover in the class. Would that be helpful?
Sure. Go for it, Megan.
Okay. I talked a little bit that in my intro. So first week we really focus on core values, identifying what those might be and where it is that you might not be living your life aligned with those values. Um, Second week, focusing on sort of what your strengths and your callings are, what are needs that are not getting met, talking with others that you trust in your life about what they see as your core values and strengths and callings. I think most folks were surprised by things that people said, pleasantly surprised, and that really resonated for folks. We have a whole week focused on the importance of social connection. I think most of us would agree we could use more these days. And certainly, I think folks that are in the class were wanting that, and thinking about how to build more connection in life. Um, and then the second half of class is more about sort of designing your life based on all that information, right? So it's first the research, like, oh, who am I? What do I want? And then thinking about how to sort of move forward. And as I was saying, both in what we often called and joked about the little P, right? It's like, what are the building blocks in sort of everyday life that will create the life that you want and help you sustain the intentions and follow through on the intentions that you create in the class. But also spending one class session, we all developed purpose statements, sort of the larger, bigger vision and dream. And for some folks that super inspiring and brought tears, and for others it was like, oh, I just need to think about the day to day. That works really well for me. Um, I think Melanie mentioned, fair advertising. I do ask, and I lead in each class, a grounding practice and helping people. I just deeply believe that for each of us, and looks different for different folks, but we need a reflective practice and a way to settle our minds, especially these days when we have so much information coming at us all the time. Like, how do you pull back? And for some of you, that may be reading a novel a week or going for a run. But in the class, we will focus a lot on mindfulness as one tool. Um, yeah, so that gives you a sense. And yes, our last week, as Courtney was saying, it's important to celebrate. Our last week was called Celebrate. And the class really ended up designing what that looked like together. Some of the things like a potluck so we could try these salads that someone was testing. I hadn't imagined at the beginning. So I do try to create space for folks to think together about what they need in the class.
Mhm. And for the reset, creating momentum, first week is really getting to know everybody in the room, but also explaining one particular model on the phases of transitions. And one thing to keep in mind about that is we are going through transitions in every aspect of our life because that's what human being is in my world. But we may be in different phases of that transition model in different areas of our lives. And then kind of a group activity to self-identify where you might be in the area of your life that you want to concentrate on creating that momentum in. Then we talk about reframing stories around whatever that area is. Like, how do we shift some of those personal narratives? Third week is looking at this reframing work/contribution to the world and for the world. And then we just do an outline of that 30, 60, 90-day plan of how you're going to start moving in this direction and getting things done. Then we kind of fill in some blanks with looking at your relationships, they evolve during transitions. Secondly, the next week would be about inventory and planning, like what are all my resources? And then how am I going to keep this going after the class? What's my accountability look like? And then we will end with commitment and committing out loud to what you're going to do next and also celebrating our time together.
And Courtney, you're also going to do just a lunch and learn, right? Do you want to say
Yes,
anything about
we've got a
that?
little secret. We've got a little lunch and learn, little bonus here. I have a set of worksheets that I love walking people through it. I call it creating your ideal work environment dating profile. So for those who want to take one other that are really looking at whether that be career change or refire upment, in other words, an encore career, what that might look like. This will give you some ideas of kind of what you need, the environment you need to be in, the culture that you need to be in to thrive. And so people love the title because it really is like your dating profile. What are your non-negotiables? I mean, a lot of the principles are the exact same you would do. Like, this is what I need. So, yeah.
So we have a comment about our podcast. So I don't know if folks have been listening in. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. But we started a podcast, and our colleague Bree Smith has been facilitating discussions. And what the way we're envisioning this whole Midlife Academy is, we've got 2 courses right now, but we want to be expanding in ways that make sense. And the podcast is a way also to, start thinking about some of the issues that people are concerned about or thinking about during midlife. So this person mentioned the burnout session, which I thought was really wonderful. We had an expert on burnout talk about what that's all about in the podcast. I know that, um, Megan, I'm sure that came up pretty strongly in your class. Courtney, I'm sure it will be coming up in your class. I think a lot of people come here because they feel really burnt out and they
Oh,
know
no.
what their life isn't working, but they don't know what to do about it. And I wonder if either of you could say something about that.
I can say something. Actually, the person who was interviewed for that podcast, I'm blanking on Jeannie's last name. Kate, I don't know if you can help me.
Strom,
Thank you.
yeah.
Spoke and came and visited our class and talked with the class. I'm hopeful that she might be willing to do that again. Um, but I'll say from day one with the class, I did talk with.
Really started going back.
Oh,
I
oh, sorry. I just started the podcast because I was going to put it in the chat.
I was like, who's
Sorry.
that?
This is the burnout one.
So from day one, I really encouraged folks to really reflect throughout the class on what the problems are that they needed to address, right? And for some folks, it's like, I mean, we had a doctor who came back, had started at the beginning and said, I can't do this anymore. I've got to leave. And towards the end was just like, actually, I love my job. I just got to do it in a different way. I have to figure that out and figure out what that looks like. But I love this work. It just I need to live into it differently, right? And I need to ask for different things. Or folks that were like, great, I'm living at too high of a stress level that's exhausting my body and my mind. I'm not sleeping. And that's sort of that core building block that I need to work on first before you can even figure out if I need to make bigger changes. So.
Mhm. Do you have anything to add?
Well, and I think this kind of reflection, no matter which of the 2 courses, starts to give you insights into that next level down of what's really going on, right? Even if you think you've got it all wired, there's more than likely something underlying that will come up in this kind of reflection and work. We go, oh, yeah, I need to address that too.
Mhm. Absolutely. So we did have a question. Would either course be suitable for someone who just retired at 70 years old and isn't looking for a new career? I'm really glad this question came up.
Yes, I mean, I would say the
Absolutely.
Cultivating Purpose class this fall, I don't know, Melanie, maybe a third of folks were either heading into retirement soon or were already in retirement. So absolutely, right? I mean, we all need chances to step back and be like, all right, what do I want to do now, right?
Yeah.
Um, and as I said, the oldest person we had in the class was in her early 80s, and it's like, just I can't travel anymore. And my grandkids give me lots of purpose, but I want other purpose. And what else do I want? So absolutely, would be my answer.
Absolutely. In that conversation about quote reframing work, that's why I like to use the word contribution. I mean, that could be volunteer or pursuing a hobby. And when we think about some of the most significant contributions that have been made in our culture, a lot of times it's people that didn't start that conversation in their life till 60 or 55 or whatever it might be, right? So there's lots of space here to explore.
Melanie, I think you were gonna say something too.
I was just gonna say that, yeah, I mean, like for uh, for me personally, career was on my mind, but it wasn't the central focus of why I took it was a piece of it, but it wasn't the central focus of why I took the course, and I got a lot out of it. And I'm not ready for retirement, but and career, like I said, is on my mind, but it wasn't centered around that, and I thought that there was the content was very accessible for me and very relevant. So.
I will also say I'm thinking of someone who is in her early 40s who said to me that she found it really helpful to also be like, right, it will help me to think about my retirement before I get there. And
Yes.
how I want to spend that time and be intentional on
Mhm.
what might be my retirement persona or personas. How might I want to shift my identity and to also not wait, right? And so I think folks really enjoyed being at really different stages of midlife and sharing those ideas back and forth.
And I will
Good
say
stuff.
too, I've done a lot of work in that transition to retirement space, and I know, people underestimate some things. Like one of the things that they underestimate is how much they're going to miss their work relationships.
Yeah.
Even if, they didn't like everything about work, you know, um, and they miss things like being part of a team, working together towards a common goal. And for a lot of people, it is a big transition on just like how do you recreate your life? And that sense of contribution is a piece of it. Like, now how do I do something of significance in life? And what is really important? And so all of those things are really woven into retirement because retirement is also not just leisure, even if, like, for many people, for one thing, they're often working in some capacity. And, I mean, the work people, it's like an oxymoron. I mean, I'm retired, but I'm working. And I mean, that is increasingly what people are saying. But they don't want to work in that job. They're so ready to leave
Right.
that job, but they need a new way to work. And this is one of the areas where our institutions, like, there's not a lot of places to go and say, I don't want that job anymore, but can I downshift? Can I work part-time?
Mhm.
It's hard finding those opportunities, and it's in part creating those opportunities. And I think that's part of what you can get from both of these classes. Like, what is it you want? Let's put it out there. Let's come up with some possibilities of what might get you there. And then let's do some little experiments. Let's try some things on.
Well, and I think anyone who is even close to saying, yes, I'm ready to quote unquote retire, or as a younger friend of mine called it, refire upment. I love that.
Mhm.
Um, I will share, I was very planful as I moved from ending my corporate world. Like I had a whole year of downshifting that was agreed to with my employer. Um, and one of the oddest days of my life was January 2nd, 2019, when my phone did not buzz all day long. There was no email, and I had planned it, and it was still unsettling. And I had said I wanted to be able to sleep, read, completely relax for a full month. And I found myself walking around my apartment going, it's okay to sit down and watch TV. I had to talk myself down and I had planned it. So those people, I think there's something when you know that's what's going to happen and you know you're going to have those shifts to be as intentional as possible. And it's a very odd time when it first happens. It's crazy.
And someone just said, I was offered a voluntary retirement at age 55, and a friend called it pre-retirement. So we don't have good language. I mean, pre-retirement, retirement, refirement. Yeah, we don't have good language around this midlife time. And I think that's also part of what adds to the difficulty of navigating it.
But like for folks this fall, for a lot of people, it resonated creating a portfolio life.
Portfolio.
I
Yep.
would say I've sort of been living my whole life. So for those of you who
Mhm.
get my LinkedIn,
Mhm.
you're like, what? It all relates if you reach out, if you don't see how it all connects.
Yes.
But not all of us have been in sort of linear spaces, but as you move into retirement or sort of thinking about life in some different ways and you have some more opportunities to do that, it may be that there's sort of different pieces that you're focusing on throughout the week. And not
Well,
just
and
not just in terms of work, right? But
right.
leisure and play and making an impact in the world, whatever that
Well,
is for you.
and we get to make up the word that means the most to us in this process, right? We get to create our own titles. I've shared openly one of my new titles is I'm a wild elder in training, and that lights me up. I'm like, yeah, let's do it that way, right? Make it up. It's your
I
life.
I'm when I'm stuck, I just mutter to myself a lot, just get curious. Just get
There you
curious.
go. There
For
you
me, that's what sticks.
And I say, you don't have to have it figured out, just start. Just try something.
Go.
You don't have to have the answer. And if it's a failure, it's not a failure because you learned something out of it.
go. That's it.
Um, so it is interesting. I mean, that portfolio idea where it's not just work, it's your whole life. And how are you piecing together life in a way that works for you? I do know one of the fans of us is Marcy Albahar, and she was a New York Times columnist, and she has written several books, including the Encore Career Handbook. But anyway, she wrote a while back a book called Slash Careers, where you know, people would talk about, well, I'm a waiter slash actor slash, and it's like these many identities. And that book has had a resurgence because I think the way we're working is so fractional. Like we're doing parts of work, and there's a lot of freedom that comes with that, but a lot of challenges in how to make that happen. And so, I do think the world of work linear careers are not necessarily what most of us are doing, and it may not even be what we want at this life stage, and so
Exactly.
it's really opening that up to more ideas.
Kate, before we wrap up, we got an important question, I think, about when the last day to register is. I
Oh,
would say our experience this fall is register. If you know you want to take a class, register because the class filled up and we had to have a waiting list. We can't have 100 people in these kinds of classes. We want you to have a more intimate experience. My class that is online starts on January 20th, but I'm really hoping that those of you who want to take it register soon because, as I mentioned, we're sending a package your way, and I'd like you to get it before class starts. Be easier to do instead of scrambling last week.
yeah,
I'm just being honest. But you can register, right, Kate, up to the day if it doesn't
Yeah,
fill up. Um,
right.
right.
and to just say we had not everyone joined, but we'll be watching this recording. We had over 350 people just sign up for this info session, so there's clearly interest. So yeah,
Yes.
my answer
And,
would be you want to take the class, dive in.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And so signing up sooner is probably better. And yeah, we welcome you to do that. So, yes, so we are at the end. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Melanie,
you.
for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thank you
Yes.
so
And
much.
So good to
Megan
see
and
you.
Courtney. I will also just refer everybody, go to our website. We've got a lot of stuff on the website, links to all of the content we've been talking about. It's midlife.umn.edu. If you have any questions, you can email us or you can call me. The email is midlife@umn.edu. So just send us an email. We'll get back to you. We'll call you. We're happy to answer your questions. And thank you for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, all.
Okay, bye.